I know we're not doing justice to what David actually said, and I have a lot of sympathy for what he said, although it raises worries. I'm not going to paper over that it raises worries. So let me try and characterize what I think David, I don't think Shelley's right. I don't think what David said you can translate in terms of primitive ontology at all. I think David's point was this, and this is a kind of, again, it's a transcendental Kantian requirement on a rationally acceptable physical theory, right? And it should worry you a bit that it's Kantian and transcendental, because you're saying it's not analytic and the world might not be like that. It's just we are forced to accept theories like this, because even though if the world isn't like that, tough for us, right? That because your rationality will never allow you to understand the way the world is, right? Like a world that violates certain uniformity things, because you always say, okay, any inductive thing could be wrong.
Right.
And the theory that says it's wrong could be the right theory, but you'll never be rational to believe that the sun won't rise tomorrow or whatever. So
Right,
what
so
David was saying,
so unfamiliar.
right? So David was saying, look, at the end of the day, it's going to be a requirement that you produce the theory. It has a physical picture of the world. It has a physical picture of you as a part of the world, and that you as a part of the world have to fit in this as being in a position to have reliable access to the world. Okay? Now, a Boltzmann brain doesn't. A Boltzmann brain is sort of wildly misinformed about the world. Right? They have all these mental states that seem to be coming from things outside, especially if you get down to the brain part, right? So there's no environment, right? They have this mental state, and they think they're in a conference, and they're talking to people, and it's all just random fluctuations that are hitting these nerve endings that are floating in the middle of space, right?
One of them thinks he's Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. And David's point, as I understood it, was just, you can't rule that out physically. There's a sort of rationality constraint that rules out methodologically that you could ever accept such a theory. Given that, you have to locate yourself, right? It's not what Shelley was saying, that we somehow care about the early stuff, because you could say, oh, we care about the early stuff, but maybe I'm a Boltzmann brain, but that's okay, because what I really care about isn't me, right? What I care about is what happened a long time ago, right?
I think David said both things, though.
Okay, but I think the second one is the right one.
Okay.
And David was saying sort of the only coherent way to place yourself in this picture is in the early part.
I think that's true, but it's not satisfying, not satisfactory. I think you need to do two things. There's no question that you can't accept the theory that we are a Boltzmann brain. That's ridiculous, as Feynman said. It doesn't really get you very far for two reasons. David was wrong about saying this first objection to Sean. There are really two problems with the fluctuation hypothesis. One is that by the standard canons of scientific analysis, it's empirically wrong. That is to say, well, you would expect to see things happening which don't happen, as Sean said. Number two, it's not cognitively stable, which was David's point. But they're both correct points. David's point's a little bit more complicated one. Sean was making the simpler one. It's not a wrong point. David's response to that, namely that no, it's not really empirically disproven because it's still possible there was a bigger fluctuation of something like that. Sure, but that's always possible. You can always try to save a theory on those grounds. But if you do the normal kind of statistical reasoning, you say, aha, I would have expected this, but this thing, because it's overwhelmingly probable in my theory, and I don't get it, then you say, aha, okay, I'll say it, and then maybe something unlikely happened. No, you give up. You probably give up the theory at that point. I think Sean's right about that.
So I think that David, when he talks about us needing to have a theory in which we can locate yourself, is definitely right. But I think that just points to the problem that Sean's raising. So Sean's saying, look, David, on your theory, given certain plausible principles of rationality, you're not justified in locating yourself where you want to and considering yourself a rational being.
Yeah.
So David's response is to say something like, well, we need to drop whatever principles, whatever indifference principle you're using to get that. But Sean's response is to say, look, we want to keep that principle of rationality, but we need to change our theory so that it gets us, with that principle of rationality, a way to locate ourselves someplace that works for us.
I think one should have
But I think they're
sympathy for
agreeing
both.
about
I think one should
the
have
problem.
sympathy for both sides here.
But I think
Because it's a puzzling situation.
if you take the problem really seriously, I think the thing to say it's empirically refuted won't fly. Because to say it's empirically refuted means you're trusting your memories. You're going to say, oh, it's empirically refuted because it would have made a prediction blah, 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 that didn't come out.
Right, you expect
That-
it to be refuted, it hasn't refuted yet.
Well, but if you say it hasn't been refuted yet, you're assuming you actually made a prediction 5 minutes ago that turned out not to be true. Now, on one of these theories, you never made the prediction in the first place. You have a false memory of having made a prediction, right?
This point, I mean, let me ask, maybe it's a stupid question. I don't understand your point. Okay, suppose in this room is fluctuation. Okay, so we're here discussing, we have all these.
It just started.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it just started.
So,
No,
There's a serious point in
listen
what I'm
to it,
saying.
Okay, we have these false memories. Okay, now we decide, let's make a test, let's open the door, look at what's outside. Okay, so we make a test, and in that moment when we open the door, we see equilibrium outside. We know that the test failed. Now, why isn't that a refutation?
The point is, if you open, the problem is to tell a story, a coherent story about making a test and whether it failed or not. That involves thinking you know something over a span of time. That you started out in a certain thing, you performed a certain procedure, you got a certain outcome. Yes? The kind of skepticism involved in the Boltzmann brain thing is the kind of skepticism that will cut off your reliable access to the past at every moment. It'll keep cutting it off.
I don't understand. We don't start out being skeptic. We start out believing that we have history, and now we make an experiment, we look outside, and then we discover, oh, there's thermal equilibrium.
Yes.
So something must have been wrong with our beliefs. Okay, so that's the first time we start questioning our beliefs. Isn't that what would happen?
But that's not, the issue isn't, could there be things that convince us we're wrong, that we are Boltzmann brains? It's the question is our experience good evidence that we're not Boltzmann brains? You're looking at a non-actual situation, right? What if we opened the door and found God, close the door quickly, there's thermal equilibrium outside. That would cause us to radically, on anybody's view, that would cause us to radically reevaluate our picture of the universe, right? That's not the issue. The issue is, does the fact that we haven't seen that constitute good evidence that we're not Boltzmann's brains?
I mean, it can't.
And that's the could it? That's the question we're after. I mean, that was what Shelley was claiming when he said,
I think
look,
it
the
does.
theory that we're Boltzmann's brains has been empirically refuted. That's
think it
your
does.
point.
I think
But I
it
think
does.
there's a deeper
Yeah.
problem if you really want to take it seriously.
Yeah, but if you just start from the point that all you have access to is what is present right now, how could it refute
Right.
it? It's always.
I don't know, I don't start from
It's-
any
it's
particular
been- it's-
point, I start with a scientific theory, like Boltzmann, like Boltzmann did when he considered the fluctuation hypothesis. He thought that explained everything, then he said, but is there I should find certain things happening if this theory is correct. These things clearly don't happen, so obviously this wasn't correct.
Sorry, but that isn't a prediction, is it? Because there's a Boltzmann brain that for every experiment you do, there's a Boltzmann brain that sees that event.
But that-
So you just find out you're not the Boltzmann brain that only fluctuates
So-
into
so
existence for this long.
There's
There's
some
a
Boltzmann brain
that
that, there's
fluctuates
some
into existence
Boltzmann
for a
brain that
little
would
bit
do
longer.
it, but that's not, I'm just saying as a scientist, that's how I would reason. There are certain things that I would expect to see. That's what Feynman
Yeah,
said.
I mean, the reasoning is correctly, this would be crazy to take seriously the Boltzmann brain hypothesis. The way I thought the question was something like this, that by making the past hypothesis as a transcendental hypothesis in order to, because we can't say that we have evidence for the past hypothesis if what we start with is the current state and the uniform probability distribution, because that yields the falsity of the past hypothesis. So what the idea is that here's a picture of the world in which we can provide something like a grounding for a lot of our ordinary beliefs, okay, with the past hypothesis. Now the question is whether the existence of Boltzmann brains in the far future undermines this, because in fact we might really be a Boltzmann brain. That was I think the line that
So
Eric
here's
is
just
thinking about.
I need to add.
And the reply to this was, look, we have to have been assuming from the beginning that we're in the initial segment for this thing to work. That's an assumption that's being made here, the transcendental assumption, in order to make the whole thing work.
I just have to add a little bit to what Tim said to add to what I think what goes wrong for him. Everything he said is right. There's just, I thought it was a little bit more to the start. We're supposed to do this Kantian thing, figure out what it is that we has to be the case, and then we're supposed to recover it from fundamental physics, right? Then we're supposed to be able to write down a set of laws that recovers all the things that we got out of that Kantian endeavor. And it's that little bit that I think maybe now we can't do.
Right, and I don't know that David would disagree with that.
I don't think he does. I was talking about
Yeah,
it. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.